Senator Paul.
I think it's easy to look around the world and find places where the U.S. taxpayer can be asked to send money to fix the world's problems, but there is an important question we might want to ask before we start sending $100 billion more. Where are you going to get it? You know, we don't have any money. Every bit of our tax revenue goes to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and food stamps. Those four programs consume all of our tax revenue. Everything else is borrowed. In fact, the entire discretionary budget right now is being borrowed. We borrowed $1 trillion in the last 3 months. Interest rates have doubled. Interest payments have doubled. So you can have all this goodwill and try to fix the world's problems, but you're ignoring the rot and ruin you're creating in your own country. Mr. O'Brien, in Russia's weakened state, it's tempting to forget that they're a nuclear power. But I think our foreign policy decisions need to take into account the dangers of war escalating in Ukraine. As Harvard's Graham Allison points out, if Putin is forced to choose between humiliating defeat on the one hand and escalating the level of destruction, there's every reason to believe he chooses the latter. There's a great deal of evidence that the war in Ukraine has come to a stalemate. Even Ukraine's commander-in-chief of the armed services has admitted as much. In Graham Allison's view, the Ukraine war has escalated far enough to see how bad things would become if we end up in a world where nuclear weapons are used. Allison believes that where we are now, both for Putin's Russia and for the Biden-led U.S. and the Western alliance, it's time to search for an off-ramp for all of the parties. What is being done at the State Department to search for an off-ramp?
Thank you, Senator. A few points. I can speak to the foreign policy implications. My belief is if we don't stand with Ukraine now, we'll be spending much more on defense in the future. And much of this supplemental goes to reinvest in the United States. So far from rot and ruin, we're actually shoring up the foundations in our energy sector, as Assistant Secretary Pyatt.
So your argument is that war and funding war around the world is good for our armaments industry?
I'm saying this supplemental is good for our economy.
For the armaments industry. So really, it's a justification of war. To me, that's sort of reprehensible. The idea that, and this is coming from my side as well, oh, glory be, the war is really not that bad. Broken windows are not that bad because we pay people to fix them. Broken countries are not so bad because, hey, look, the armaments industry is going to get billions of dollars out of this. Yeah. I think that's a terrible argument. I wish y'all would say maybe there's go back to your freedom argument or something. But the idea that you're going to enrich the armaments manufacturers, I think is reprehensible.
Well, Senator, I'm not making the argument war is good. I'm making the argument in this case war is necessary.
And that we can make a little profit on the side. It's not so bad since the armaments guys will make a lot of profit on this, right?
No, Senator, I think you're proposing a kind of false choice that I either have to say that or say nothing. What I'm saying is that our economy rests on a foundation of innovation, and in this supplemental, we're investing in our energy sector, as you just heard.
The money's borrowed. We're borrowing the money. We don't have it. We don't have a pot of money. So what you're arguing is, in essence, that we borrow the money from China, we send it to Ukraine, Ukraine sends it back to buy arms from us, and that's a win-win. How do we win when we're borrowing money to pay people? See, this is this sort of false sort of argument that, oh, well, look, we'll create 5 jobs for every dollar we spend, but we're borrowing the money. It doesn't make any sense. It's coming from somewhere where it would be in a productive use to where it's into the use of basically fomenting a war and continuing a war.
No, that's not the choice in front of us, Senator, and I'm sorry that you feel that that's the way you want to frame it. The choice in front of us is, do we invest in the capacities that allow this war to be won? Those include capacities in energy, in defense, in IT.
In the original question, let's get away from funding the armaments people. I'm not for that. But the original question is, what are you doing to develop an off-ramp? When I listen to your presentations, it sounds like the Department of War. I don't hear the Department of Diplomacy in front of me. Where are the diplomats? Is anybody talking about negotiation? Yeah. Do you really believe that that Ukraine's going to push Russia out of Ukraine? They're going to push them out of Crimea, push them out of the east, and that Zelensky's position, we will not negotiate till they're gone from Ukraine, is viable, and that there's not going to have to be some negotiation beforehand? If you believe that, though, the meat grinder continues, and Ukraine will be an utter destruction, and tens of thousands of more people will die. if there is no negotiation? You would think that as a superpower, we would be involved somewhat with encouraging negotiation, but I've heard nothing from you and nothing from anyone in your administration, frankly, that talks about negotiating.
So, well, Senator, then I hope you would, sit down and talk with me about what we're doing in this regard. Here, I'll give you a little sense of it. All wars end with a negotiation. We've made clear we'll do that with Ukraine, not over Ukraine's head. It takes two parties to negotiate the end of a war. President Putin is not serious about negotiating the end of the war. He has said he wants to wait and see what happens in November 24. So we're preparing for that eventuality so we can have a negotiation that will actually stick, as opposed to the track record of broken agreements that President Putin has made with a whole range of his neighbors up until now. So that's successful diplomacy, not
Senator
mere
Merkley.
diplomacy.
There are actually some who say we're back to about where we started as far as negotiating, and tens of thousands of people have died on both sides, and we haven't been successful. But I still hear only war, and I don't hear diplomacy.
No, but I think what we're looking at is successful diplomacy. I just spent last weekend with 66 countries talking about the basis of a successful peace in Ukraine. Russia didn't show up. That, again, is the problem. You don't have a willing partner on the other side. So simply saying that there must be talks is, you're asking for a monologue, not diplomacy.
Senator Merkley.
Secretary O'Brien.
No, Senator.
Senator Merkley.
Secretary O'Brien,